I am Daniel Lucas, and welcome to Book 101 Review. Book 101 is all about the books that I read for the last 40 years, and today I have my feature author of the month of November. He's award-winning author, no other than Mr. Gerald Everett Jones.
Thank you, Daniel. Pleasure to be here.
Welcome back, Mr. Gerald, and as usual, can you please introduce yourself?
Well, Gerald Everett Jones, I've used my middle name Everett for some years as an author because there's just a few other Jerry Joneses on the planet, including
Yes.
the one who owns the Dallas Cowboys, and that's not me. So that does help separate me from the others. There are others that write books as well. And I've been a writer most of my working life, which has been a few years, as you may be able to tell from my television image. And I also worked in computer graphics for some years. I was involved in some of the early filmmaking work in digital cameras and what they called film look video. And computer, as I say, computer graphic charts and graphs and animations and those kinds of things. So I'm a bit technical, although I still get frustrated, as we all do, by things that all. Let's see, what's the Microsoft slogan? Software that almost works.
So, Mr. Gerald, thank you so much for sharing your talents to the world. Looking forward for more award-winning piece. So, speaking for award-winning piece, let's talk about your, of course, Harambee. How would you describe Harry's personality and character at the beginning of the novel?
Well, I think I'm going to read you just a very brief introduction, which will tell you a lot about Harry. Harry Gardner, who thought his name Harrison much too formal, did not consider himself an immoral man. His shrink, if he still had one, would say he was on a therapeutic quest. The more generous of his peers in the golf club locker room would say he was taking a much-deserved breather. But he had to admit, at least to himself, that his intention in going to East Africa was to engage in illicit activities, although he had only a vague idea of what those activities might involve. You see, Harry is a widower. He's living in Los Angeles. He's not a young fellow. He's retirement age. And he's something of a couch potato, basically. What can he find to do these days? Play golf and bridge with uninteresting people, or people who want to sell him insurance policies. That's usually what happens. But he runs across this tour director, this Italian fellow, Aldo, who says that he packages unique experiences for people of high net worth. Basically, he's going to take him on a tour anywhere he wants to go in the world, and he's going to show him a good time. Now, Harry isn't sure that he wants this. And indeed, he's something of a couch potato. He's not particularly adventurous. But Aldo convinces him that at the very least, if they go to Kenya, they'll see the wild animals that are still alive, the so-called Big Five. And by the way, over in that part of the world, as well as in some other places that are resort destination, there just happen to be lovely women and a lot of booze, good food. So Harry's expecting that it's going to be 24/7 party time, and he's not sure he's up for that or could endure it. But once he gets there, he realizes it's really just not his thing. And he's right. He's just about ready to come back. He's only been there about a week. And he's also decided safaris aren't quite for him because, unlike the National Geographic specials, he actually witnesses big cats tearing apart, you know,
Yes.
baby antelopes and those kinds of things. So, and then, a safari is not is very much a trip into the grim reality of survival. And for that reason, you tourists should understand that taking young children on safari, it depends upon where you're going to go and what you're planning to see, but it would have to be planned very carefully so that they wouldn't witness things that might traumatize them. So Harry is somewhat fed up with that aspect of it. He, like I said, just after a week, and life, he's there on the banks of on the shores of the Indian Ocean, there in Diani Beach in Kenya. And it's a resort community. It's a very small town. And it also holds the prospect of being somewhat boring. It's a bunch of expats kicking back and swilling Tusker beers all day. And that's some of it anyway. But he's just about to leave, and he meets a mature lady, a Kenyan lady in the supermarket, who is very attractive. And it turns out she's also single by herself. She tells him she's got two grown children, but she's been divorced for some years, and she's not part of the resort community so much as she is an accountant for the local hotel. She's not a party person either. So you might call Harry Harambee's Kenyan Sundowner an interracial love story, but it's very much more than that. Within the bookstore genre, it's what they call second chance romance. People finding love late in life. But in fact, also, the core of the story has a lot to do with who Harry is, what he aspires to do at this phase of his life. It's something of a journey in self-discovery, because the big question for him is, has he given up on life? Is he simply waiting to let go? And one of the things about arriving in Kenya is he begins to understand that the life there is it's not all party time, but the other thing about a developing country like that is there's an awful lot of corruption there, and it's in your face. It's something you have to deal with on a daily basis. And unfairness, if you will, I mean, the whole idea that only the people with money can get justice, I mean, that might be true all over the world, but it's particularly true, in Kenya, where people even say corruption's the mother of Kenya. They say it like they might say the sun will come up tomorrow. It's just something you have to learn how to cope with. So Harry must really come down to decide when he's about to think about leaving the country. Number one, he's met this woman who, it's not love at first sight. They're both kind of practical people. It seems kind of transactional. But then on the other hand, if he goes back home, what is there for him? So his decision is, am I a tourist or am I a citizen? So if he's going to stay, he begins to realize that he will have some responsibility to his neighbors. These will be his neighbors. These aren't people that are going to be catering to him in the restaurant. These aren't going to be people who are trying to find amusements for him. These will be people who he will do things for, and they will do things for him, just simply as a way of surviving and getting along. And yes, of course, there's that income gap. And if you'll permit me also, Harry finds, as I did find when I lived there,
that the notion of an American's expectation of racism does not apply there. My expectations were completely different. I just assumed, as a Christian white guy going to Kenya, I didn't really, I know the history of colonialism. I thought there might be a lot of resentment, and of course, Americans and Europeans tend to have a bit more money to spend than a lot of the people that you'll meet. There's that. The thing that I began to realize is that colonialism in, especially in East Africa, is in some sense so yesterday. It's in the rear view mirror. Okay, if you're an American or a European or New Zealander or if you're from Oz or, well, South Africa, different story. But if you show up in Kenya, there's two reasons why you must be there. You are either a businessman and you're there to invest.
Yes.
Okay, brother. Or you're a tourist and you're there to spend a lot of money to have a good time. Yes, brother, I'll show you the good places. All right. So, but the thing that people don't really, especially people, if they're African American from the United States and they're going, and this has been related to me by people who've had this experience. Some of my friends from Los Angeles, they were newlywed people from South Central, and they were going to go to Kenya, and they thought, I'm going home. No. There are 43 different tribes in Kenya, and they all mistrust each other. And a lot of it has to do with not just blackness, but the degree of blackness in your skin, your tribal accent, your culture, your background. I mean, a Maasai, who are notoriously the warriors of old, are very tall people. They typically will not carry a firearm of any kind. They carry a very long hardwood club with a ball on the end, and they know how to kill a lion with that. Okay,
An elephant too.
and well, you don't want to do that, but
No.
yeah, but only in defense anyway. But
Yeah.
but the thing about Maasai is a Maasai has a reputation for being a fierce defender, a difficult person to contend with, and many security guards in the big city of Nairobi, which is the New York of Kenya. Many security guards are Maasai. Well, how do you know they're Maasai? They wear a red blanket over their uniform. It's a red checkered blanket, and that is something of Maasai tribal custom. Now, some Maasai will tell me that they'll see this fellow walking down the street, and he'd be a security guard, and he's just left his shift, and he's wearing a khaki uniform, but he's got the blanket over his shoulder, and they'll say, he's not Maasai. He just has the blanket so that the people will respect him. But in Kenya, there are really only, of the 43 tribes, there are really only 3 that have been prosperous and have held political power since independence in the early 60s. So it's a very autocratic government in many ways. They have a parliament, which is a legacy of the British system, but politicians routinely will line their pockets, and police will come right out and ask you for a bribe. It's not a secret. It's not a big secret. It's like, okay, what will it cost me to move on? And there's a movement all over the world to electronic documents, right? We see that. There are ATM machines all over Kenya. Very easy to get your cash out. Also very easy to use you can even use your tap card to pay for your dinner. No problem there.
Yes.
But the thing about Kenya government is it's still, despite this emphasis on electronics, there's still this legacy emphasis on paperwork. And every time you need a permit to do something, every time you need a license to do something, every time you need to buy something, it needs a rubber stamp. It
Wow.
needs some official's rubber stamp. So you need to pay the whatever the fee is for the license. So here maybe it's $50 for the license. But then also here's $100 cash for the person who has the stamp. Because that document's no good without that stamp. Nobody's going to accept a copy. So, that's the kind of life, and it's Harry does. It's not a particular spoiler to say that Harry does eventually decide that yes, he does want to commit to being a citizen. He does want to. Uh, he's not sure he wants to marry Esther, she's not sure she wants to marry him, but they'd like to try to be together. But Harry Harambee, the nickname that he gets, Harambee is the old term for a celebration which became community meeting, which later became political fundraiser. Harambee is a political fundraiser. And because it was a political fundraiser, and then that system went rapidly corrupt, Harambee is basically a slang term for a scam. So when they call Harry, he's and you can see on the Kenyan money, the motto of Kenya is Harambee, and it means the same thing as the motto of the United States. The motto of the United States, e pluribus unum, one from many. Harambee means we're all together. But Harry then asks his friend, he says, well, why do they call me Harry Harambee? And he says, they call you that because their money's in your pocket, but you just don't know it yet.
Yes, for sure. Interesting novel. Mr. Gerald, indeed interesting. So, how do you use humor in the novel to convey serious themes?
It is a novel with a serious theme, but it does definitely have its lighter moments. And Harry has something of what you might call a sardonic wit. He tends to share the things that he observed. And when Esther actually criticizes him for not taking a stand or not being serious about things, she alludes to the fact that he goes everywhere, as many tourists do, with a driver. He's not going to learn how to drive on the wrong side of the road. But then also it's somewhat hazardous because not everyone is a skilled driver either, and the truck drivers are murderous. So, or they would call them lorries or lorry drivers. But Esther says, Harry, are you just going to persist in watching the world from the back seat? So this is the decision. Again, we're coming back to committing to, as a tourist, yes, you might be sitting in front of the widescreen and you're watching. Maybe you can't watch American football. You'll be watching it's strange that many Kenyans are fans of British football. We'd call it soccer, but their favorite teams are Manchester United, and it's like, what about Kenyan soccer? And then also cricket matches. They'll watch cricket matches. There's so many cricket matches from India. So you may be that would be your attitude as a tourist, and you may be wagering on games, and you may be swilling down. Tusker is the Kenyan beer, and you don't dare drink Heineken if you want to join in. That's from the wrong side of the continent. So yes, I would say sardonic humor and observational humor is one of the things that Harry observes is how transactional the Kenyans are with each other, even when they're members of the same tribe.
if your brother asks you for a loan, and it may be a modest amount of money, if your brother asks for you're obligated to give it to him, but don't necessarily expect it to be paid back. Now, if it's not paid back, don't be surprised if you come out to your car one morning and all 4 tires are flat. This is transactions. Okay, if you buy a new car, well, no, not there are very few new cars except the ones that the expats import. But if you buy a car there, it's likely to be a used car that would be it's probably going to be a Japanese car, because in Japan they drive on the same side of the road as the Brits. So you'll have a right-hand drive Japanese car, and the thing is that when you inspect it, when you buy it, it will look pretty clean, and you say this is a good value, and then the car dealer may say, well, I really want to clean it up for you and make sure that it's in prime condition, and I'm going to inspect it again. So come back on Wednesday and then take delivery. Don't take delivery today. So you go back on Wednesday. If you don't pop the hood and look inside yourself, you may find that many of the parts that looked new before have been replaced with used parts. This is just
different parts.
Daily life. Daily life.
So, Mr. Gerald, how did you use supporting characters to shape Harry's outlook?
Well, in screenwriting, there's a term used for someone's sidekick, the opponent ally. And every star has an opponent ally. And typically, an opponent ally is someone who sometimes takes your side, but other times is the only person who's willing to disagree with you and debate you to show you, help you decide whether you're right or wrong. And the Aldo, the tour guide, the guy who somewhat of a slick character who gets Harry involved in this tour, sells him this tour package. He's Harry's opponent ally. And it turns out, well, actually, Harry gets suspicious when he realizes that Esther actually knows Aldo. Well, how does she know Aldo? Did Aldo did he set Harry up to meet her? Is this some kind of trap? But the thing that they will tell you about in screenwriting is one of the reasons you want the opponent ally there is that you want to be able to communicate to the audience a plan without a lot of boring speech, okay? And typically you'll make it as an argument between the main character and the opponent, like, well, let's do this. Well, no, that's a bad idea. And this is going to go back and forth. And so because conflict is drama, you're going to bring the information forward, but people are going to be interested in the argument. If you remember, we're talking about the old days, 50s and 60s actor Steve McQueen. Okay, a man of few words, had 2 expressions, smiling and not smiling. Okay, well, one of the things they said about actors like Steve McQueen, also John Wayne, some of the others, is they didn't really like a lot of dialogue. They didn't want to have to memorize too much, but they also felt like the star would somehow loses power if they have to explain too much about themselves. So what you do is you put the plan in the mouth of the opponent ally. And the opponent ally is going to say, okay, at 2 a.m. tomorrow, our car pulls up to the bank. At 2:15, we're met by Jason on the corner. At 2:18, we're lighting the fuse on the... Okay, so here's the whole plan, right? So all Steve McQueen wants to do is say, let's do it. And the audience won't remember the details of the plan, but they're going to remember when Steve McQueen said, let's do it.
Let's do it. So, how did you balance satire and realism in the narrative?
Well, I would say that the Harry Rambee's Kenyan Sundowner is highly realistic. They are fictional situations, and certainly the bad actors are amalgams of people you'd read about in the newspapers and people you'd see on the corner and room. And one of the things about a place like that is that the news is not censored 100%. It's not like the news is blacked out. On the TV and in the newspapers, you're going to be able to read about things that go on. You might not read about the reasons behind them, or you might not read about the investigation that is triggered after that, or what happens in the investigation. Well, the investigation may just simply die. Okay. So one of the things you begin to realize as a citizen of a small town and in a country that is where it's difficult to find truth is that your local vegetable stand where you go every morning to get your fresh food for your dinner that night, the rumors that you hear may be very valuable. This may be the only way that you find out what's going on. And I'll give another example I'll give, which seems like corruption, but the government said, oh, everybody needs a new plastic identification card. And you've got 30 days to get it. And they thought, okay, well, this is all about the government collecting fees. And this wasn't just from foreigners, this was from everybody. Okay. And the locals were saying, oh, this is a joke. This is a joke. And some of them didn't bother to get it. And you would think that after a while there would be fines and penalties and whatever. And then it seemed like nothing happened. And then the rumor went around that no, actually, the government's reason for requiring those cards is they were gathering data for a credit card company that wanted to be able to market to Kenyans. So, the government took their fee, and it's they delivered some lists, but maybe it wasn't everybody. Who cares? The bank got what they wanted.
Not for everyone. So to sum up, for this novel, Mr. Gerald, aside for award-winning novel, what is your other aspiration for this novel?
This novel actually has been recorded as an audiobook and it's still being edited. So it is it's a 40 chapter book. So I mean it's definitely an audiobook experience. But I would say that it would be, your expense for the audiobook would be a whole lot cheaper than traveling to Kenya and having the experience. So, or even the book itself. I mean, as the cold weather approaches, on a cold blustery day, curl up with the book and just imagine that you're, flying along with Harry on vacation on the white sands of the Indian Ocean. I mean, it is beautiful. White sand and turquoise water. And the only land between that part of Kenya, I think the next land, if you go east, is not until you reach Singapore. Maybe not even until you reach like Australia. But I mean, there's a lot of water
Yes,
in that
lots
direction.
Of
And of course, that is where the old ancient sailors would sail from the Mediterranean. Then they would portage their boats across what is now the Suez Canal, and then they would go down the Gulf and into the waters of the Indian Ocean, and that was the trade route by boats all the way over. And there was a lot of trade between East Africa there, Kenya, where Mombasa is today, and Zanzibar, and the west coast of India in Malabar, very, very famous ancient seaport in Malabar. And so the sailors who would often be in the old days, they were actually Arab sailors with African slaves. This is Africa. The Arabs were about slavery, African slavery, centuries before anybody else was involved. But but the sailors would sail one way with the trade winds, which would blow some months of the year. They would sail to India with those winds, and then the sailors would live for some length of time until the trade winds shift direction, which they do once a year, and then they would sail back to Africa with the trade winds in the other direction. And that just happened. They would make one round trip every season, every change of the trade winds, and that went on for thousands of years.
So, Mr. Gerald, again, thank you so much for sharing Harambee to the world. I hope there will be another or sequel or prequel for this novel. So, Mr. Gerald, can you please invite our listeners to support all your books?
GeraldEverettJones.com, and you can see right there Everett with 2 T's and Gerald with a G, and you can actually find some complimentary ebook review copies there. So drop on by, shoot me a line. I'd be happy to hear them.
Yes, people, follow Mr. Gerald Everett Jones on Substack, right?
Yes, Substack as well. Yes, please.
Yes.
Thinking About Thinking is my blog.
Thinking About Thinking. So, people, let's support Mr. Gerald Everett Jones, because if you support him, more award-winning pieces like this. So, Mr. Gerald, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Daniel.
More to come, people. See you soon.